Hey, how's your homeschool week going? I said this on Instagram just minutes ago, but Tuesday is the most productive day of the week. The most productive. One of my girls said, Tuesday? Isn't it Monday? No, it's Tuesday. It's like Monday is like our starter day. And by Tuesday, we're rip roaring ready to go. And there's no question, that's also my experience. Even as a graduated homeschool mom, I get stuff done. But it is hard for me to move from Instagram Live to in our coffee chat to Facebook Live and also deal with the goats. It's like I have more kids. They are kids. Anyway, I hope you're having a really great week. Everything's going well for you. I'm especially addressing two questions in today's homeschool Q&A, one from Michelle and one from Gabriella. Have I ever told you the origin story of these numbers at the top of my homeschool room, which is obviously not my homeschool room anymore? It's actually my husband's political campaign office. And so I just have to shoo all his stuff over to the side so that it doesn't look quite as messy as it actually is. Anyways, these numbers up here, my kids were so bored in the beginning of the pandemic, my teenage kids, that they started writing decorations. They created a decoration out of pi, the numbers of pi. That's how bored my kids were. I'd love to hear how bored your kids were and how they were bored. Would you put it in the comment section below? I'd love to share that. I think it would be hilarious. That's how bored my kids were. Well, today we're going to be talking about unrealistic expectations. We all talk about it at times. Most of us talk about it. And in two ways, Gabriella and Michelle shared their experience with unrealistic expectations. I shared a few of mine on the Instagram Live when I was chatting with Natalie Burns from Homeschool Teaching Simplified. And she's homeschooling a few kids that are, I think 8 is her oldest right now. And it's just really interesting to learn, even from me, or for me, to learn from other homeschool moms that are at very different stages of their homeschools. And also, we're all just different. So we're all doing things differently, experiencing them differently. And when somebody says we have an unrealistic expectation, we're experiencing that differently too. So put this into context for your own unrealistic expectations. Before I even share the questions, what are your unrealistic expectations? Not your expectations, because we all have expectations, but the unrealistic ones, or the ones you think might be unrealistic. So Gabriella said she's still learning to let go of massive expectations, how to trust her gut, and really enjoy her moments with her kids together. And Michelle said she's learning how to navigate everyone else's expectations. Sound familiar? And by everyone, she means her husband, her mother, her older daughter's expectations, her sister's expectations, etc., etc. So like everyone. As far as her extended family, they just don't get it and they hate that we're homeschooling. Well, she's fine with that, as in okay that they have no experience with homeschooling, so they don't understand. She still gets it. She still finds it extremely stressful and upsetting. And as far as her husband, who is 100% behind homeschooling, he's not 100% behind how certain things have to be let go because she just can't accomplish any or everything. He does not expect that. So that's also really frustrating and upsetting. And she said, I remember once you saying, can you tune them out? They're really, really loud individuals, Michelle says. So it's basically, how do I grow duck feathers and let everything roll off? Okay, girlfriend, let's talk about how to create duck feathers. First, you must be a duck. But really, this discussion about expectations, it can partly be, I'd say, a discussion in our Building Boundaries group coaching program, because how we speak to ourselves impacts how we show up in our life, in our homeschool. We can be as critical of ourselves as we can be, or we can receive critical or criticism from other people. But I specifically went into a lot of the things that I've written and wanted to share some things that you could do, the homeschool mom who is dealing with her own internal expectations, 7 things specifically that you can do to address these expectations. First thing that I say is to get your big emotions audit. If you haven't already, ask for it. I will put it in the link below in the comment section. A big emotions audit to help you understand what's actually going on. Sometimes we have so many things up here. There's so many demands and so many kids' questions and so many things that we know we need to do or we need to finish that we really don't know what we're dealing with. We aren't clear on what it is we're dealing with. And so if you're in that state of feeling overwhelmed or stressed or frustrated or feeling like I can't meet all the expectations of everybody, you first have to get clear on what is the thing you're actually dealing with. What are you actually challenged by? The things I share here about expectations may not be your experience of expectations. Even these two people that I'm speaking to specifically, Gabriella and Michelle, unless I'm actually sitting with you in a coaching discussion, I can't know for sure what it is that you're most challenged by. Because if I'm sitting with you, I'm going to keep going deeper until you hit on something that you know that's the reason why I've got this unrealistic expectation. And it might be different than you're actually thinking it is at face value. I've learned that many times, that it is not usually what you see right off the bat. So sometimes we need to do a big emotions audit or assessment. Really, you're just trying to really hone in to what is the thing that is your biggest challenge. Learning to get familiar with our emotional landscape, that's what the big emotions audit does, is help us get really clear on what it is that we're expecting, what it is that we're experiencing when that expectation is happening, or when we have told ourselves this thing has to be, we must do the thing. It's okay to have high ambitions. It's totally okay. It's amazing. Your kids are benefited, you're benefited, life is more interesting. And then sometimes life says, no, that's not realistic for that child. So many possible examples in my mind. When I think back to all the years of my homeschooling, I've told you a lot about my moments of overwhelm. But sometimes the reason I was overwhelmed is because I had these ideas of, I am going to do better, that I'm going to offer more in my homeschool than any private school could offer. And I really did try to plumb the depths of the education system. Outside of teaching about Stoic philosophers, I was going all over the place. Like, we were doing all sorts of different languages, and all of that is so cool. Like, all the things that I put before my kids as a feast, they say, I thought they were really cool. They're really cool things to learn. But some kids were either like, I just really don't want to do this anymore. You get to a point where you discover there really is just like a point where kids no longer are hearing you because they've been trying to sit down and engage something with you for too long. Or they just don't have the capacity to sit for more than a certain number of minutes or whatever it is. So then when you push past that, they're just not even with you. And yet your ideas are fun. Your ideas are clever. Your high ambitions are totally fair, and they're a beautiful gift to your kids. In fact, here I have, literally right here, I have one of the notebooks that I routinely added to every year, all the ideas of things that I wanted to share with my kids. And I didn't always do that. I didn't get them all done. They're still not all done, and my kids are mostly grown, and I am probably a graduated homeschool mom. Okay, so I just dropped my papers. I'm just gonna grab them. So learning about what your actual expectations are, getting really clear on them, not shaming yourself for having high ambitions, but also being realistic about what you can achieve. Sometimes you need to look at your timeline or your times, how much time you have available to different things, and ask yourself, is this realistic? And that's why I included the time audit and why I often share the time audit with people. What I did was something that seems really tedious. I wrote everything I did down in a week, and I discovered that my thoughts, my expectation of what we could do, what we could accomplish, how much time I could clean the house, how much time I could drive my kids to different things. It wasn't possible. It was not actually physically possible for me to do all these things because they don't usually schedule violin lessons at 3 in the morning. And I did not have as much time as I would like to have thought I did. And even the activities that I did and I tried to force inside the time that we did have, I did it with pressure. It was compressed. I didn't create margins around our time to go to town, to drive to some extracurricular. It was like, we have to go right now and get in the car right now so that we can make it there in perfect time. There can be no construction on the road. There can be no police stops, or there can be no accidents or anything, because we will not allot time for that. Also, there wasn't any margin time even to help feel my life, like actually experience it for a good long time, like to feel like I was present in it, because I was just about checking stuff off, not really experiencing life, not really being in it. And it's just not worth it. Life is too short to not feel like you're actually experiencing it and being present in it. And when it involves your kids and you're creating all these lovely, wonderful memories, practice being present. Even if it was super challenging, like it was for me, to be present and create margins in my life so that I could actually be present with them right there. And had I been given that advice then, and I'm pretty sure I was, it would have been super difficult for me to actually accomplish. But I've learned that you are only trying to practice strengthening a muscle, aka the presence muscle. You don't have to be fully present all the time. No, just practice being present. So using the time audit was super useful for me to get clear on how much time I had to do all the things, so that you could be realistic about what you can do. I showed you this book of all my homeschool ideas, and I can show you an entire closet back there filled with other books that we never finished. You do not have time to do everything and to actually complete everything. And as we spoke earlier, where I spoke with Natalie on the Instagram coffee chat, it is not possible to do everything that you want to do with your kids all the time. You're going to have to let go of things. You have human limitations, and you don't have to worry about gaps, because you're going to have gaps. You're going to have gaps. Everyone has gaps. Unless you can be equivalent to God, Google, or ChatGPT, you got gaps. Everyone has gaps. This is not our goal, is to make sure we don't have gaps. So that's a common conversation point I have. I don't know what it is. Obviously, I don't have the details around, Michelle, your husband's experience of how you're doing things. I have learned that it's not just about trying to make sure there are no gaps for our kids, but sometimes we have these notions of certain times of day we have to be doing certain things that are school-like, and we are very familiar with that pattern or that routine because most people know that routine from childhood, and most kids in our culture know that routine. And so it's so emblazoned in our brain that we assume that that is the way that things have to be, and this is the only way that kids learn. And one of the things that I would encourage you to maybe look into is deschooling, coming away from the schooled mindsets that don't serve you, and asking yourself, like, what is the reason that certain things, certain ways of engaging that we do in the education system, why are they the gold standard for an education? Deschooling helps you to feel free in your homeschool. It certainly makes your kids happier, but I don't mean unschooling, by the way. I'm talking about just leaning in to child-led learning or releasing unhelpful schooled mindsets so that you can do what you're doing in your homeschool routine intentionally. Here's another unrealistic expectation that I know I had, and I know everyone doesn't have this one, but I've heard it often too, is that we expect that our days are always going to go as planned and the kids are going to be happy, and they will not argue, and we'll know that everything is happily ever after when everyone is happy. Some days won't be like that. Everyone won't always get along. You won't be always getting along with everybody. Conflict is normal. Conflict is why people grow up and learn how to relate to other people. And though I am not fond of it, I am definitely not fond of it on a global scale. It's painful to watch. It's painful to watch when our kids are fighting over things too. Sometimes it's just irritating, and I get that, and I honor the fact that you experience that. If that's your experience, it certainly was mine, but I've learned that it is unrealistic to have a perfect, no conflict day. This isn't a real thing. So if we know that that's not real, then how do we create margins to fully engage moments where our kids actually need to let go of whatever original routine, or say we're at a nature reserve. Let's just throw this out as though it hasn't happened to me. But we're at a nature reserve, and it took us an hour to drive there. And we're so excited that we can go meet new homeschool families because we just moved to this new community. And it would turn out that the kids start getting fidgety and frustrated and irritated in the back seat, and they're fighting. And they're fighting right before, literally moments before we enter the nature reserve. And you're thinking to yourself, or shall I say, I was thinking to myself, now? Like, we're so excited to finally be meeting this community of people. Couldn't we just enjoy this day that we've invested so much time in, that we've planned for? And yes, we should be able to, but some days it's not going to happen. And for various reasons, it didn't happen. And not everybody wanted to show up with the same excitement and enthusiasm that mom did. So then how do you create a margin or allow for space to accept your reality, to recognize that kids do indeed have conflict. They do push back or have frustrating moments that are definitely not well timed. And though I feel for you when that happens, because I do know that's irritating or frustrating at times, it's also a reality of how we experience motherhood. It's just a reality. And so sometimes we need to stop and take care of the most important thing, which is usually, not always, but usually, let's address the conflict. Let's address what's actually going on for people, help each other understand each other's feelings, address each other's needs, and go into the deep parts to understand why we're experiencing these things. One thing that I shared was that no one ever complains about all the cool things. What did I mean there? Realize that kids may not always express appreciation for the effort you put into their education and activities. Do you know, we know that. We know that as moms, that kids won't always be grateful for the wonderful investment that we have given them. And yet, some part of us is like, you should know that we have chosen to do something amazing for you. And I have been there. Also, I've learned, as Julie Bogart said, this is our big adventure, this homeschooling thing. They just were coming along for the ride. So as with most children's experiences, I don't know about you, but you were a child once too. I didn't say, hey mom, thank you for all that you're doing for me, or thank you dad for working so hard. I didn't do that. Kids don't do that. Not typically. Some kids do, but most kids don't. You're doing this homeschool thing because you've chosen to. So expecting them to take joy in everything that you're choosing to do is probably unrealistic. And I wanted to share that some days will feel genuinely hijacked. There's going to be moments where you're hit with emotions, maybe a deep sense of, angst or frustration over something that's going on in the world, like what's been going on in the last few weeks and a couple weeks. And it just feels like a lot. Is it a coincidence that I'm thinking a lot about Overwhelm these days because I'm moving into the group coaching program for overcoming overwhelm, burnout prevention program. And I know that there's a lot of people that are struggling with overwhelm for reasons that I can't really touch. I think the tools and strategies that I use, or that I encourage people to use, the mindset shifts that I share in this program, I think they can help us in all the different elements of our lives. But sometimes there are seasons of life, there's seasons of world issues that we just cannot pretend away, and they have a giant impact on how we're feeling. They make us feel anxious, or they make us feel sad, or they make us feel angry. And I think when we're in that space, I think it serves for us to just stop, acknowledge that this is where life is at right now, and it doesn't feel good. If you can, reach out to somebody to either connect with them so that you can address whatever internal stuff is going on for you, or also reach out to someone that needs your support or who you think might need your support. But sometimes, some seasons, some weeks, for various reasons, our lives, our homeschool days can feel hijacked. And life does that. Things aren't always going to stay on task. Our planners are not always going to get checkbox or checked. And the last thing that I would say to dealing with your internal expectations is to attend to your emotional atmosphere. Care about what's going on, learn self-compassion strategies, and also attend to other people that matter to you in the same way. Pay attention to your emotional well-being. Get really clear on your landscape, your internal landscape, and practically address the stuff. Don't just say, I'll just tell someone about all the frustrations I have and just blah, blah, blah. I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm whatever. That's not enough just to declare it or complain it or gossip it, or it just isn't enough. That might be a first step if someone can reflect back to you to help you get really clear on what's really going on in here. And then for you to decide to grow in it and to say, okay, what can I do to shift that from feeling whatever unpleasant, negative emotion or experience you're having to move into a different space, one that serves you, one that serves your family. In my podcast episode this week, I'm talking about Jenny Brown's book, Growing Yourself Up. It is an amazing book, a pivotal book that helped me see why it was necessary for me to focus on my own growth before I'm trying to help my kids in their growth. And I'm going to be discussing it in the Homeschool Mom Room on Friday. We're calling it the Homeschool Mom Zoom Room in the Homeschool Mom Support Group on Patreon. If you want to come chat about it, you don't have to read it. That is not part of this book club. I know how busy you are. I've read it, and I've brought some principles from the book that we can have a discussion about. We can have a discussion about personal growth for homeschool moms, choosing that growth trajectory, as I have said many times this week, choosing it so that we are doing the thing that we're being called to, really. Like, I think this entire life thing is about us growing. And so we're being pulled to grow in our unique ways. And so we have to choose to do that. So that means that we're attending to our emotions, we're attending to our relationships, and we're going to be showing all of that, everything that we learn, to our kids. So if you identify with any of these thoughts, you probably are hearing conversation points. I'm speaking to unrealistic expectations right now about how we're relating to ourselves in unrealistic expectations. And I think that that is an internal boundary discussion. That's how I define an internal boundary, is how you are relating to yourself. I think, or I've come to understand, that the energy that we expend in unhealthy ways toward speaking to ourselves unkindly or speaking to other people in ways that aren't, clear and compassionate and kind, directly is proportional to our, obviously, satisfaction, but it is, It connects with our boundaries. When we are clear on our boundaries, then we have more energy. We have more internal energy. We're just clearer in our lives. We're able to engage people more straight. We do our activities with more clarity. And when we get clear on the boundaries that we have in our relationships, whether that be our relationship with others or with ourselves, and also how we're framing our homeschool vision or how we're framing our homeschool schedule, then we can move towards clearer, stronger boundaries. We can bolster our boundaries. And that will make us feel like we are more self-nurturing, more self-compassionate, more authentic. And I've learned we listen to other people more authentically, more compassionately, all of it really solid. And guess what? In the mix of it all, we actually don't feel beholden to unrealistic expectations, the unrealistic expectations that we are telling ourselves. So I would love to hear what your thoughts are. Of course, a discussion on unrealistic expectations can go in so many directions, and I do have so much more that I could share on that. If you're interested in joining me in a coaching conversation, you're welcome to do that. And I would love to hear your thoughts. What are your tangible, unrealistic expectations? So what is it you're thinking? Is it a hot lunch at lunchtime? Is that what you're expecting? Or is it that your child knows how to read before they're 6? Or is it that no family member is going to be frustrated with you, see the world differently than you, or disagree with you? I'd love to hear your thoughts too. I hope you have a really great homeschool week, and we'll talk to you soon.